come back.
Dracula, the king vampire, an undead fiend drinking the blood of his living victims.
Count Dracula sleeps in this coffin, but rises every night at sunset. Chick is right. This is awful silly stuff.
Sleeps in a coffin? Don't be daft.
The only way to stop them is to track each one to his coffin lair, where to drive a stake through his heart.
But Dracula didn't really exist, did he?
I've been to the country where he lived. I've been to the ruins of his castle. I have seen the monasteries and been there that he endowed. And I can assure every one of you who is listening or who is watching that Vlad V, Sepesh, Dracula did exist.
A 15th century prince of Wallachia, Moldavia, and Transylvania, the real Dracula became legendary for impaling his enemies alive on sharp wooden stakes. Author Bram Stoker combined historical fact with supernatural legend to create his fictional 500-year-old fiend. First published in 1897 and never out of print, the novel thrilled millions and was adapted into a stage play in the 1920s. Nosferatu, a silent screen version, appeared in 1922. This unauthorized adaptation renamed the vampire Count Orlok and changed the locale from Transylvania to Bavaria. Actor Alfred Abel played the bald, rat-faced fiend under the name Max Schreck, the German word for terror. Unlike later versions, director Friedrich Murnau presented the character as an unclean embodiment of disease and filth. Hollywood's man of a thousand faces, Lon Chaney, played a double role as a Scotland Yard detective and the wide-eyed monster in London After Midnight. No prints of this 1927 MGM movie survive. Typically, in this era of mystery plays like Cat and the Canary, the trick ending revealed the vampire as a mere actor in an intricate plot to solve a murder. But director Todd Browning gave the undead their due 4 years later, at the beginning of the sound era. Universal Studios purchased the movie rights to Dracula as a vehicle for Lon Chaney, who had just completed his first talking film. When Chaney died in 1930, the studio screen-tested performers such as Conrad Veidt and Paul Muni. But the role went to a Hungarian actor who had worn the black cape for a year on Broadway and 2 years on tour.
I am Dracula. A moment ago, I stumbled upon a most amazing phenomenon. Something so incredible, I mistrust my own judgment. Look.
Dracula. The very mention of the name brings to mind things so evil, so fantastic, so degrading. You wonder if it isn't all a dream, a nightmare.
Rats. Rats. Thousands. Millions of them.
But no, this is no dream. This is Dracula, the original terrifying story of a maniac and a man who lived after death, lived on human blood, took the form of a vampire bat, and lured innocent girls to a fate truly worse than death.
Dracula?
What's he done to you, dearie? Tell me.
He came to me. He opened the thing in his arm, and he made me drink.
Universal released Dracula on Valentine's Day 1931 to tremendous success. Unlike other Scream monsters, the Count did not require heavy makeup to provide chills.
Isn't so much a makeup. It's rather expression.
Bela Lugosi wasn't afraid to spoof his own image, as you see in this 1933 short subject, where Dracula meets Betty Boop.
Betty. You have booped your last boop.
In 1935, Todd Browning remade London After Midnight, splitting the Lon Chaney role into two parts. Lionel Barrymore played the investigator. But since Universal owned the name Dracula, Lugosi's character was called Count Mora.
Let no one leave. Move on yet your pattern. We will not stop until we have discovered the vampires who seek the life of this beautiful girl and her lover. Watch out! They may be hovering over you, or you, or you. Danger stalks through the night. No one is safe.
Their fury would follow us to the ends of the earth. No, we must destroy them all together.
Scourge of mankind, they shall be found. I hereby summon to this place next week every person within the sound of my voice. You shall be judges of this eerie conspiracy. Here we shall meet Lionel Barrymore, Elizabeth Allen, Bela Lugosi, Jean Herschel, Lionel Atwood. Mark of the Vampire. I gave all of me. I was greater than any real vampire.
Universal followed up their 1931 film with a script suggested by a story, Dracula's Guest, which was actually an atmospheric chapter cut from the Bram Stoker novel. Dracula himself was played by a dummy on a funeral pyre, but his daughter carried on the name with her father's taste for pretty young girls.
Dracula! He's come back!
Sander, look at me. What do you see in my eyes?
Death.
Do you like jewels, Lily? This is very old and very beautiful.
Please don't come any closer.
Pulse is weak, Dr. Goss. Growing weaker. All your skill can't help her now. She's under a spell that can be broken only by me. Or death. I am Dracula's daughter.
This distaff Dracula died with an arrow through the heart, a nice change from the usual wooden stake. But the family tradition continued in 1943. Universal had a new horror star in Lon Chaney Jr., who had played the Wolfman, the Mummy, and Frankenstein's monster. Chaney actually played Dracula, not his son, though he subtly disguised himself by the name Count Alucard. Or perhaps he was just dyslexic.
I see you marrying a corpse, living in a grave.
The vampire can assume very many different forms at birth. Sometimes it appears as a bat, and sometimes as a small cloud of swirling vapor. In this way, it can move unseen among its enemies.
Son of Dracula, searing the screen with new terror in this weird tale of the living dead who rise from the grave at night to prey on unsuspecting victims. With Louise Albritton, Robert Page, Evelyn Ankers, Frank Craven, J. Edward Bromberg, and Lon Chaney as the new Count Dracula, you'll shudder at the screen's most fascinating woman vampire, luring men with cold beauty and the promise of immortality.
Count Alucard is immortal. Through him, I attained immortality. Through me, you will do the same.
Bela Lugosi kept his cloak warm in low-budget shows like Monogram's Spooks Run Wild, kidding Lugosi's image as a monster. The script was written by Carl Foreman, later to win an Oscar for Lawrence of Arabia.
Hey, you! What are you doing here? Now you see him. Now you don't. Hold your breath and save your laughs when Bela Lugosi, that master of horror, meets those gloom-busting East Side kids. Even a respectable ghost gets a nervous breakdown.
It says here that in the night he prowls about seeking new victims, and in the daytime he sleeps in a coffin.
Well, let's wait till daytime, huh?
We ain't waiting for nothing. We're going right now. Go ahead, open it.
Oh, you open it.
Maybe it ain't supposed to be open till Christmas.
Who are you? You don't remember me. But 20 years ago in this very house, you scared the health out of me.
Lugosi played it straight in Columbia's Return of the Vampire. Since Universal had given movie audiences a 2-for-1 deal with Frankenstein meets the Wolfman, Columbia felt obliged to give Lugosi a werewolf assistant.
Will be destroyed.
Universal Pictures sued, fearing the film would harm the box office potential of their film, Son of Dracula. That same year, Universal produced a monster rally originally called The Devil's Brood.
Say, why don't you try to get that actor, Bela Lugosi? It's right up his alley.
But instead, the film co-starred a younger, less expensive John Carradine.
I'm going to repay you for betraying me. I'm going to give that brain of yours a new home in the skull of the Frankenstein monster.
The jugular vein is severed, not cut, but torn apart as though by powerful teeth.
A werewolf. Last night I killed a man.
You didn't know what you were doing.
But I did. I wanted to kill.
I think they're after Dracula.
A similar recipe was repeated the next year at the same studio by the same director with an almost identical cast.
See before you a man who lived for centuries, kept alive by the blood of innocent people.
When the full moon rises, I turn into a werewolf, with only one desire, to kill.
I tried to perform the miracle of science and failed. My blood is contaminated with the blood of Dracula.
Monster films fell out of vogue after 1945. One theory is that audiences had enough real horror from World War II. A simpler theory is that the films were just plain lousy, like Scared to Death, made in 1946, but unreleased for a year. This was the one chance audiences had to see Bela Lugosi swirling his cape in unliving color.
My little friend Inigo is deaf and dumb. He cannot hear and he cannot speak. But he reads the lips, and I would advise you to say nothing to annoy him.
But I really should announce you.
My dear girl, if I allowed myself to be announced, I doubt I would be received anywhere. My dear doctor, truthfully can it be said that your house is your castle, protected by your countless slaves?
I was warned you might appear like one of your own illusions out of nowhere.
My dear Joseph, you have not changed a bit. Have you met my friend, Mr. Raymond? A very good idea, my dear Joseph, to have a private bodyguard at your beck and call.
Well, so long, Mr. Leonide. Don't pull any more little men out of your hat.
Very well. You may have the room next to my daughter-in-law. I know you like that. Oh, yes. Something to think about.
Universal's last two monster rallies verged on parody, so the next logical step was full-blown burlesque. Lon Chaney returned as Harry Larry Talbot, Glenn Strange again played the monster, and Bela Lugosi was back in harness as the Eternal Count. Universal contrasted their roster of monsters with their top comedy team.
Count Dracula sleeps in this coffin, but rises every night at sunset. Chick is right. This is awful silly stuff.
Come on, take it all out.
Wow! Look out, Chick! Come on! Samantha, come on! Wait a minute!
The nation's top comics, Abbott and Costello. Petrified, but hilariously. Plus the dangerous and terrifying Wolfman, played by Lon Chaney. Plus that fiend out of a nightmare, the vampire Batman, Count Dracula, played by Bela Lugosi. Plus the most dreaded creature of them all, the Frankenstein monster, played by Glenn Strange. Plus a couple of luscious but designing females in the spookiest laugh fest on record.
Lugosi revived the play Dracula in London in 1951, and while there, lampooned his image in Vampire Over London, co-starring a music hall drag artist named Old Mother Riley. But Lugosi played a mad scientist who just thinks he's a vampire.
Will you be working in the laboratory tonight, Master?
Of course.
Master,
Yes?
I'm curious to know why you always sleep in your evening clothes.
Very early.
Yes, Master.
I was buried in them. And what is this for? This is the robot control. I intend to build 50,000 robots. 50,000?
Yes.
But how many have you built so far? One.
I don't know whether I shall brag or complain about it, but Dracula is the only picture in existence in all the world, which since it is made in 1951, is the only picture which is revived in every city in America every year.
Result of Dracula,
I make a living. Now, since I played Dracula, I'm the boogeyman.
Bela Lugosi dreamed of making a comeback in a color remake of his famous role. But this was an era of space monsters and science fiction. Instead, he donned the black cape one last time in life, in test footage later incorporated into the most infamous and hilarious of horror films.
Safe to state that the grandchildren of some of the people in this theater will not be born on Earth. They come from the bowels of hell, a transformed race of walking dead, zombies guided by a master plan for complete domination of the Earth. Plan 9 from outer space. Starring the most nightmarish cast ever, Bela Lugosi, the seductive Vampira, and Thor Johnson as the Walking Dead.
Turn off your electro gun! No! No! Stop it, Dad!
I can't get it. It's jammed.
Stop it, you fool!
Bullets bounce off their bodies. Rockets, missiles, jets cannot stop their death ships. What earthly power can stop this terror? For a glimpse of things to come, see this blast of screen suspense. For it could be happening right now.
Bela Lugosi went to his real grave in the cape of Count Dracula. It seemed quite natural. Ironically, his dream of a color remake became real 2 years later. Hammer Films of England infused new blood into the genre, with striking photography, sumptuous sets, and believable performers. The quiet intensity of Peter Cushing as the vampire hunter contrasted with the tigerish, sensual interpretation of Christopher Lee.
Decided in my own mind from reading the book that the author had presented this character as a romantic, erotic, heroic, fascinating figure, highly dangerous, savage, but above all, which I think is the most important thing when you're playing characters of this kind, tormented, agonized, sad. What a ghastly fate to be immortal.
This is the story of Dracula, a creature who destroys all whom he touches. Dracula the terrifying, the feared, who sleeps in the tombs of the dead by day and arises at night to inflict his terror upon the innocent and the unsuspecting.
You must help me. You must. You're my only hope. You must.
I'll help you. I promise.
Please try and understand. This is not Lucy, the sister you loved. It's only a shell, possessed and corrupted by the evil of Dracula.
How do you destroy a fiend who has so far proven himself indestructible? Those who come to end his reign of terror stay to become his victims.
Castle Dracula is somewhere here in Klausenberg. Will you tell me how I get there?
You ordered a meal, sir. As an innkeeper, it's my duty to serve you. When you've eaten, I ask you to go and leave us in peace.
This is the doctor who dares to challenge the vampire Dracula. This is the anguished man who fears for the lives of his beloved, the girl who is his sister, and the one that is his wife. Dracula, the bedeviled master of all that is evil.
The film was an international success and inspired several quick follow-ups from various companies. In Hollywood, American International Pictures grafted the vampire theme onto the plot from I Was a Teenage Werewolf.
2 tiny punctures of the external jugular vein, right side.
Any blood?
No, that's the strange part. No evidence of bleeding.
This medallion, composed of horrors unimaginable, taints the secret heart of Sandra Harrison with the blood of Dracula, stimulating young girls beyond any reasonable control, piercing the earth's crust to make black magic with the blood of Dracula. Transforming a young girl's love into terrifying bloodlust.
Was the killer human or animal?
A Dracula.
The Count came to California in Return of Dracula, also known as Curse of Dracula. Hungarian actor Francis Lederer, like Bela Lugosi, had been best known as a romantic leading man on stage and screen.
Undead are my allies. The night is my domain, and the dark, dank tomb my dwelling place. I feast on human blood. May be yours, so beware. Beware.
Brand new, all new, the return of Dracula. From beyond the grave comes the dreaded Dracula, spreading corruption and horror wherever his cursed shadow falls. Innocent beauty becomes the vampire's prey, as paralyzing fear turns to hypnotic fascination.
You will do as I say.
Yes.
I bring you death, a living death. One drop of your blood and you're bound to me.
Jenny Blake's soul must be freed, Doctor. And all those souls of her victims, if any.
But how?
With a pointed stake right through the heart.
He's gone.
Hammer Films delayed their sequel to Dracula because Christopher Lee refused to be typecast as Lugosi had been. But in an obscure Italian comedy, Tempi duri per I vampiri, he may be called Baron Rodrigo, but he certainly looked and acted a lot like Count Dracula.
In our family,
You'll be next.
Hammer continued their series without Dracula. Instead, this film featured a dashing, depraved aristocrat called Baron Meinster, played by David Peel. Peter Cushing returned as the determined Dr. Van Helsing.
Listen to the beat of your heart, Marianne. You hear the beat of fear within you? Fear that will rise to a shattering crescendo of terror. You have strayed into a world of evil, where frightened people are held in the grip of unearthly horror. Beware of pity for the handsome prisoner in the Castle Meister. Beware of love, for in your heart is only the pulsating throb of terror.
Starring Peter Cushing as the Doctor locked in mortal combat with overwhelming evil. Also starring Frida Jackson as Greta, who served the vampires with insane loyalty.
You needn't be afraid, she's dead.
Martita Hunt, the Baroness, victim of her own son. Beautiful Yvonne Mollor, France's latest sex kitten, as Marianne, whose beauty was her passport to the twilight world of the undead. David Peel as the Baron, blindingly handsome. Yet his kiss transformed the most beautiful girls into monsters.
Reduced to dust at the climax of the first film, Christopher Lee was ingeniously revived in 1966 for Dracula, Prince of Darkness.
Are the overlords of death. Now, more real, more terrifying than ever before. Dracula, Prince of Darkness, King of the Vampire. For 10 years, his mortal remains were cherished by his faithful servant, awaiting a victim to provide the life force for the reincarnation of Dracula. A strange premonition warns the guests at Castle Dracula that their host is ready to receive them.
I must kill him.
He is already dead. He is undead, Mr. Kent. He can be destroyed, but not killed.
Where's Charles?
You don't need Charles.
Dracula, Prince of Darkness.
James Bernard's familiar music propelled the action, but the character remained speechless, since Christopher Lee complained that the dialogue was terrible. Elements of Bram Stoker's novel crept into the script, such as running water being deadly to vampires. To no one's surprise, Dracula rose from his icy grave a scant 2 years later.
No coffin could ever hold him. No door could ever bar his way. He is back from the dead.
Count Dracula is alive.
Dracula has risen from the grave. Dracula, the most fearsome name in any language. The most feared being ever to haunt the living.
There is a girl.
Maria?
Bring her to me.
During the hours of darkness, she must never be left alone.
Bring her to me!
Christopher Lee, Rupert Davis, Veronica Carlson, Hammer's new star discovery, Dracula's most beautiful victim. Dracula has risen from the grave. To resist him is useless. To rise against him is futile. To know him is eternal damnation. Dracula has risen from the grave.
This film earned more than any other Hammer production, and during the shooting, the British government presented the company with the Queen's Award for export. Warner Brothers distributed the film with a tongue-in-cheek ad campaign, using the catchline, "Boy, does he give a hickey." Meanwhile, back at the ranch, John Carradine found himself at the top half of a rather peculiar double bill.
Your strength, Jesse James. You will need it.
Your bullets can't hurt me.
In later years, the veteran actor reflected on this film and called it a real piece of crap. In Spain, Christopher Lee portrayed the Count as Bram Stoker described him in the novel, as an old man who grew younger by drinking blood.
This was a Dracula indeed.
But he showed up briefly in more familiar costume in The Magic Christian, and played a cameo for his friend Sammy Davis Jr. in One More Time.
What fun!
Won't you join our school?
See them one more time in One More Time, directed by Jerry Lewis, rated GP.
Last seen impaled on a golden cross and evaporating, Drac was back in Taste the Blood of Dracula.
Dracula's blood.
This way, gentlemen. We know the way.
These men thought they had tasted all that life had to offer.
Ready when you are, gentlemen.
Would you be willing to sell your souls to the devil?
If one thought that one's experience might be extended.
It would be extended to infinity.
There's someone there.
Dracula is back to choose his human victims.
Alice.
Who are you? How do you know my name?
Dracula is back to select his companions in darkness, who must die that he may live. If you shock easily, stay away.
She's neither dead nor alive.
Lucy! Lucy! Lucy!
Person! Person, listen to me! The marks on her neck! She's a vampire!
Prepare yourself. Every nerve, every muscle.
No.
Prepare yourself for the greatest shock of all.
Within a year, Hammer knocked off yet another sequel, adding nudity and sadism to the plot.
Dracula's reign of horror reaches out even further. A winged creature of terror becomes Dracula's most fearsome new ally. Enter Dracula's stronghold at your peril. There is one way into his innermost sanctum.
Hey! Help me!
One way in and no way out. There is no escape from the creature that extends his power. There is no escape, not even for the protected, from the scars of Dracula.
Take her with you. You'll do terrible things to her if you don't. Terrible things.
At the request of Warner Brothers, Hammer brought the character out of Victorian England and plunked him into the heart of swinging London.
Professor Van Helsing. In reality, actors Christopher Lee and Peter Cushing, here seen under the direction of Alan Gibson during the making of the latest and certainly most up-to-date resurrection of the deadly Transylvanian in Dracula, A.D. 1972. The resounding presence of today's transatlantically successful rock group, Stone Ground by name, reaffirms the film title's assertion of mod modernity. These attractive party crashers you will find are the contemporary devotees of Dracula. They are led by Johnny Alucard. What is it about that name? Descendants, they tell us, of Dracula's greatest disciple. Naturally, their elders and betters are less than pleased. So what's to do but call for help? But here's one of their elders who'll better them at almost any deviltry, just as soon as he gets his fangs in. Indeed, Christopher Lee has loomed all 6 feet 4 inches of him through the prize horror roles since he first lurched into dominance as the monster in The Curse of Frankenstein. Little wonder that this genuinely scholarly and mild-mannered gentleman, fluent in 8 languages and deriving his descent from one of the oldest Italian noble families, has been crowned Prince of Terror. He defers graciously to the late Boris Karloff as king. At home in London with his wife, actress Birgit, and 9-year-old daughter, Christina, the aura of monstrosity is much diminished. Here the scholar comes to the fore. But are not even these lucubrations ever so slightly tainted with that major preoccupation?
I've been to the country where he lived. I've been to the ruins of his castle. I have seen the monasteries and been there that he endowed. And I can assure every one of you who is listening or who is watching that Vlad V, Sepesh, Dracula did exist.
Even the prince must be up and out into the frosty crack of foggy dawn for another meeting with the unrelenting Van Helsing and his ubiquitous stake. It's enough to give a vampire heartburn. Director Gibson shows him how to do it. He's had several tries, you'll remember. Maybe he'll do the job right this time. After all those monsters Christopher Lee has played, Fu Manchu, the Mummy, Dr. Jekyll, Frankenstein, his favorite, and that of audiences around the world, is still the Count with the Curious Taste. He's back again in Dracula AD 1972. And stake or no stake, we have a premonition it's not for the last time.
Dracula was the most fearsome being the screen has ever seen. Today, tonight, you could be Dracula's next victim.
Something new, yet as old as time.
Come on, Johnny.
A date with the devil.
Are you ready? He's ready. He's waiting to freak you out. Right out of this world.
Died September the 18th, 1872. 100 years ago to the day.
You who witness it must swear before the name of the devil to keep it secret.
Who knows about vampires, for God's sake? My grandfather died fighting a vampire. The most terrible, the most dangerous vampire of all time.
The year is 1972. A leap year in horror. A vintage year for vampires.
Count Dracula!
The time for the masters of horror to meet again in the 20th century.
There's too many dreams got buried up inside, and that's too little time inside.
The nightmare's over.
Don't think it is.
I have returned to destroy you.
Cashing in on black action films like Shaft and Superfly, American International released Dracula. Shakespearean actor William Marshall played the African prince cursed by Count Dracula himself.
Black Prince, I curse you with my name. You shall be Dracula.
Dracula, the Black Avenger, rising from his tomb to fill the night with horror. Dracula's soul brother, deadlier even than he. Warm young bodies will feed his hunger. Hot, fresh blood will quench his awful thirst.
What do you think of vampires?
More horrifying than Dracula. Dracula. Rated PG.
The thirsty Transylvanian became a cross between Howard Hughes and Fu Manchu in The Satanic Rites of Dracula. Christopher Lee played the role for the last time in this film, released as Count Dracula and his vampire bride.
They're dead. But they're alive. As religious rites become obscene orgies. Christopher Lee and Peter Cushing together in Count Dracula and his vampire bride. The king of the undead marries the queen of the zombies. On this, the eve of the undead, I call upon you to witness my supreme triumph. Van Helsing.
The body of your granddaughter will never be corrupted.
And the devil himself is exorcised.
My revenge has spread over centuries and has just begun!
Christopher Lee, Peter Cushing, the ultimate power is revealed as the two masters of menace grapple for the souls of the living and the dead. Count Dracula and his vampire bride.
John Forbes Robertson substituted for Christopher Lee in the final Hammer Dracula, but Peter Cushing remained to investigate the legend of the 7 golden vampires, with action star David Chang at his side. Filmed in Hong Kong, this was an odd blend of kung fu and horror that went unreleased for several years, finally escaping under a preposterous title.
Against black magic in the greatest battle of all time. As the 7 brothers and their one sister meet Dracula.
the blood of the virgins and turn them into zombies. You haven't seen Kung Fu until you've seen the 7 brothers and their 1 sister in action against Dracula. The 10,000-year-old monster disintegrate before your eyes as the 7 brothers and their 1 sister meet Dracula.
Dracula underwent a renaissance in the 1970s, first in a well-crafted TV movie starring Jack Palance, then a 3-part BBC special with French actor Louis Jourdan. Frank Langella revived the play on Broadway and brought his count to the screen in 1979. Even more than the Hammer films, the accent here was on Gothic eroticism. And things came full circle when Werner Herzog remade Nosferatu. Klaus Kinski, who played the fly-eating Renfield opposite Christopher Lee in 1970, graduated to the Count himself, in a makeup duplicating that of Max Schreck 60 years before. And George Hamilton cut a dashing figure as a Dracula displaced by changing times in Love at First Bite.
New York City, home of 8 million people, and 1 vampire, Dracula.
His blood in your eye.
He can disappear. He can fly. He can turn into a bat. But best of all, he can dance. The movie for everyone who thinks love can be a real pain in the neck.
Oh my, are you biting me?
Love at First Bite, rated PG.
Recent films like Fright Night, Vamp, The Lost Boys have expanded and toyed with the vampire myth without using the classic character of the European nobleman. Maybe that particular vein has gone dry. Or maybe he's just resting, waiting to be uncovered by another generation of young moviegoers. Can someone who has never truly lived ever truly die? Will Count Dracula ever rest in peace?
No. Dracula never ends.
Count Dracula is alive.
I have returned to destroy you.